Jetter. The badge is still on. That's the first thing Dorothy Williams notices when she checks her reflection in the black screen of a monitor that hasn't loaded yet. Her new badge, pinned carefully to the left side of her blazer, white against the dark fabric. Her name printed in both English and Korean. She straightens it with 2 fingers, even though it doesn't need straightening. It's 6:43 p.m. She has been at her desk for 9 hours and 40 minutes, and the day is not over. 6 tabs open. 3 flashing chats in the internal system. A localization spreadsheet someone updated while she was in the bathroom, and none of the color codes match the version she was given during orientation. The closing shift starts at 7 p.m. Dorothy is the one scheduled to cover the final review of the campaign going live in 3 markets simultaneously: North America, Brazil, and Korea. She was assigned to it this morning. First day. Scheduled. Yes. She breathes slow through her nose and tells herself she knows how to do this. She studied for this. She crossed an ocean for this. Then Director Park sends a general message at 6:52 p.m. Copy change on the main banner. New version on the drive. Adjust before 8 p.m. Not a request. A fact that has already happened. Dorothy opens the file. The new version carries a Korean wordplay. Elegant, culturally layered, genuinely clever. Her English adaptation takes 3 minutes and lands technically clean. Her Portuguese Brazil adaptation follows, also technically correct. But correct is not the same as right, and she feels it the second she hits save. Something in the tone is slightly off. Not wrong enough to fail a QA check. Off in the way that a real speaker would notice on first read. She can't name what. There's no one to ask because the alignment meeting has already started across the floor, in the glass room with the frosted lower panels, and she didn't know she was supposed to be in it. She enters 3 seconds late. In a glass room that faces half the open floor, 3 seconds late is visible from every desk. The meeting proceeds. No one speaks directly to her. A senior colleague mentions the English version with a tone that is neither approval nor disapproval. It is observation, which is worse, because observation means the verdict hasn't arrived yet. Dorothy smiles at the correct angle, takes notes, bows at the right degree when it ends, walks out. Then she goes to the hallway, not the bathroom. The hallway at the far end of the floor, the one that leads only to the emergency stairwell and a row of archived file cabinets no one has opened in years. She leans her back flat against the cold wall, looks up at the fluorescent ceiling, and lets her eyes fill. Not despair. Not failure. 9 hours of jet lag, 3 weeks of preparation, 1 afternoon of improv, and the specific exhaustion of trying not to make a single mistake while the environment she's in doesn't speak the same language in any direction, spoken, written, or social. The tears don't fall. She holds them exactly at the edge. Her phone buzzes, notifications from the team channel. She looks at the screen and her hand is trembling, just slightly, just enough to notice. The stairwell door opens. Tay Young Kim steps through it, taking the stairs because the elevator on this floor runs slow after 6. He sees a new badge. He sees a phone screen lit up with alerts. He sees her posture, upright but braced, the kind of stillness that is the opposite of calm. He asks nothing. He takes out his own phone, opens the internal team chat, and types 7 words. I'm closing the shift today. Adjust demands with me. He pockets the phone and continues up the stairs without looking back. Dorothy reads the message appear on the team channel. She stands still for 4 seconds, long enough to feel the weight leave her shoulders. Weight she hadn't named until it was gone, without her asking, without her explaining, without having to earn it in any currency she recognized. The hallway is quiet. The fluorescent light hums. Who is this man? And why is he like this? If you've made it this far and felt something shift just now, you already understand this story. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Stories like this one only exist because you show up for them. The badge smells of new plastic. Dorothy notices this twice on the subway. Once when she pins it to her blazer at the Gangnam Station entrance, and once when she adjusts it in the elevator of the building, watching the floors count upward. 23rd floor, global content and localization. Her name, her photo, her program designation in small letters below. Exchange, Diversity Initiative. She knows what those letters mean. She has known since the acceptance email arrived 8 months ago, and she spent 4 of those 8 months turning the knowledge into fuel rather than shame. She deserved the spot. The program got her through the door. Both things were true at once, and she had made peace with that somewhere over the Pacific. The floor is large, open, divided not by walls but by the arrangement of desks and the unspoken geography of teams. She is given a desk near the window, which she later understands is intentional. New people get the window desks because it's the area farthest from the center of operations, close enough to observe, far enough to contain any damage. Yoon introduces herself first. Dark green blazer, glasses perched on the end of her nose, a folder of printed documents held against her chest like a shield. She says her name, gives Dorothy a brief orientation of the floor, where the printer is, where to log issues, what time Director Park usually arrives. She gives this information the way a manual gives instructions. Complete, accurate, and entirely without warmth. Dorothy says thank you. Yoon nods and returns to her desk without small talk. The laptop they've assigned her takes 11 minutes to load past the first screen. Her access credentials work on the main system, but not on the content repository, the localization tool, or the campaign dashboard. She spends the first 2 hours of her first day opening IT tickets with a smile that doesn't waver. Tay Young Kim she notices around 10 in the morning, not because he comes to introduce himself, but because he doesn't. He is 3 rows over, closer to the center of the floor, and he works with the kind of focused quiet that doesn't invite interruption. Sleeves rolled to the elbow, a pen in his left shirt pocket, a printed checklist taped to the right side of his monitor, handwritten, not typed, with boxes checked in the same blue ink. She finds this strange at first, analog in the middle of everything digital. She files the observation away without a category. By noon, 2 of her 4 IT tickets have been resolved. She eats at her desk because she doesn't know the rhythm of the lunch break yet, whether teams leave together, whether eating alone reads as antisocial or efficient. She eats alone and reads documentation. Ha-eun, from across 3 desks, watches her for approximately 5 seconds before looking away. In the afternoon, Director Park calls a team-wide status meeting. He sits at the head of the glass room and speaks with the measured economy of someone who has run these meetings for years and long since stopped performing patience for it. He mentions the upcoming global campaign. He mentions deliverables. He glances at Dorothy exactly once, with an expression that registers her presence without commenting on it. She is neither welcomed nor questioned. She is noted. After the meeting, Jung Seo-bai appears beside her desk with 2 cans of something cold from the break room vending machine and sets one in front of her without asking. He has 2 phones, one in each pocket, with different cases. He says his name, says he's IT, says he heard she had credential issues, and that it usually takes 3 days for exchange accounts to fully clear. He says this with the easy cheerfulness of someone who has no stake in her success or failure, and genuinely just wants to tell her something useful. She says she appreciates that. He shrugs, pops his can open, and wanders back toward his side of the floor. It is the only uncomplicated gesture of the entire day, until the shift and the hallway and the 7 words on the team channel. That night, Dorothy rides the subway back to her temporary housing and stares at the car window, where her reflection sits against the dark tunnel rushing past. The badge is still on. She forgot to take it off. She looks at her own name in 2 languages and thinks about the 4 seconds in the hallway when the weight lifted, and how she still doesn't know what to do with that. She has been thinking about preparedness since she landed, about how much of the gap between where she is and where she needs to be is fixable with effort, and how much of it is systemic and slow. The first week, she had decided, was not for conclusions. It was for observation. She would watch, absorb, note, and hold. She presses her back against the subway seat and watches the dark tunnel resolve into a station. The lights flooding in, the doors opening and releasing a wave of people who know exactly where they're going. She will learn this station. She will learn all the stations. She always does. She gets off 2 stops later, and the gold leaf earring her mother pressed into her hand at the airport catches the station light as she walks toward the exit. By day 3, Dorothy has a system. She arrives 10 minutes early to everything, a habit so ingrained it functions without thought, and uses those 10 minutes to read back through any messages sent after she left the night before. She keeps a second document open behind her main work screen, where she logs vocabulary. Not Korean words, but Korean office vocabulary. The gap between what an email says and what it means. The difference between please review when available and this is urgent, but we won't say so. The distinct weight of a message CC'd to Director Park versus one that isn't. It's a private dictionary no one asked her to build. She builds it anyway. Her credentials clear fully on day 3, which means she now has access to every system she should have had on day 1, which also means she now has full visibility into the scope of what she's been navigating half-blind. The localization tool alone has 14 nested folders, a tagging taxonomy that evolved organically over 4 years and was never fully documented, and a live comment thread on the Brazil campaign file that is 63 messages deep, the first 40 of which are in Korean. She reads all 40. With her translation app and a second window, it takes 40 minutes. She is not required to do this. No one told her to. She does it because the alternative is working on top of something she doesn't understand, and she has learned, in 8 months of preparation and 3 days of this office, that the things that will trip her are always in the things no one thought to explain. Ha-eun passes her desk during this process and pauses for 2 full seconds. Dorothy looks up. Ha-eun says nothing. She looks at the split screen, at the translation window, at the 63 message thread, and then adjusts her glasses and keeps walking. It is not approval. It is not dismissal. It is, Dorothy is starting to understand, the way Ha-eun processes things before she decides anything about them. The moment of genuine problem comes at 11 that morning, in a meeting she is in the room for, but not addressed during. A senior member of the team, Kyungrae Soh, badge with a senior designation, hair neat with gel, arms crossed from the moment he sits down, presents a localization issue with the North America campaign. He doesn't look at Dorothy while discussing it. He addresses Tay Young, who listens, asks 2 clarifying questions in a register so neutral it gives nothing away, and then says the copy will be reviewed before afternoon. After the meeting, Dorothy opens the North America file and begins the review without being asked. Tay Young comes by her desk at 2 p.m. to say he'll handle the North America copy. She shows him the document already open, the issues flagged, the proposed alternatives in a comment column beside the original. He reads it. Not quickly, actually reads it. Then he looks at her. "This is thorough," he says. "I had time," she says, which is partially true. He nods and walks back to his desk. He uses her flagged comments in the corrected version. Her name is not on the final document. She doesn't put it there. That's not the game right now. The game right now is proving she can do the work, and the work got done, and she knows it. And that has to be enough. It is almost enough. Almost. Because at 5 p.m., Ji-won passes her desk and says, in a tone calibrated to sound like an observation rather than a dismissal, the Brazil version is still slightly off register. He doesn't stop walking. He doesn't elaborate. She pulls the file and reviews it for 40 minutes, and cannot find what he means. And she can't tell if that means he's right in a way she can't yet see, or if he's wrong, or if this is the office equivalent of someone throwing sand in her eyes to watch her blink. She files it away, builds a note, moves on. Outside the window, Seoul is turning the color of late afternoon gold, and the 23rd floor hums with the sound of people who have been here long enough to stop noticing the view. Dorothy notices it. She will keep noticing it for as long as she can, because the day she stops is the day she becomes someone who belongs so completely that she forgets what it cost to get there. She opens her notes document and adds 3 new entries to the private dictionary. The gap between what an email says and what it means, observed again. A new pattern. A new data point. She saves the file and starts on tomorrow's prep. Tay Young. The copy change arrives at 6:52 p.m. on day 5. Director Park's message lands in the general channel without preamble. The main banner copy has been updated. New version in the drive. Adjust all market versions before 8 p.m. The closing shift starts at 7. Dorothy is on it. She does not panic. She pulls the new file, processes the Korean wordplay in 2 minutes, understands the elegance of it, begins the English adaptation. This is what she trained for. Not just translation, but tonal transposition, taking something that lands correctly in one context and finding the shape it needs in another. The English lands clean. She moves to the Portuguese Brazil version. She has been preparing for something like this since orientation. Not this specifically, the content, the copy, the particular cultural register, but the structure of the pressure. A deadline that allows no real consultation. A deliverable that requires judgment she has to trust in real time without a second opinion available. She trained her ear for Brazilian Portuguese for 6 months before the flight. She knows the market. She knows the content. She knows what she's looking at. What she doesn't know yet is how knowing feels different under this kind of pressure. This is where the problem lives. The phrase works in English because English marketing copy carries a certain lightness in its irony. The Brazilian version needs something warmer, more direct in its humor. The adaptation she produces is technically correct. It will pass QA. It will render properly on the banner. But there is a frequency it's missing, and she knows it. She feels it the way you feel a word you can't remember sitting just behind your teeth. She doesn't have time to chase it. The alignment meeting is starting. She is 3 seconds late. In the glass room with the frosted lower panels and the view of the open floor, 3 seconds late is 3 seconds late. She takes the last open seat. Director Park is already speaking. Jiwon is across the table with his arms crossed. Hyun is beside him with her folder, glasses on, expression unreadable. Tay Young is at the end of the row, one hand resting on the table, the other holding his pen. He doesn't look up when she enters. The meeting moves through the campaign checklist. When the Brazilian version comes up, a senior member, not Jiwon, someone older, a man whose name she hasn't learned yet, reads the adapted copy out loud and pauses with an expression that is not anger and not disapproval, but is a long, genuine question about whether this is right. He doesn't direct the question at Dorothy. He directs it at the air. The room shifts. Tay Young says, without inflection, that the version will be reviewed before launch. Director Park nods and moves on. The meeting ends. Dorothy thanks everyone at the right angle, walks to the door, keeps her face exactly where it needs to be until she's past the glass, past the open floor, past the last row of desks, and into the hallway she discovered on day 2. The dead end with the emergency stairwell and the old files and the fluorescent hum. She leans against the cold wall and looks up. The tears don't fall. She holds them at the exact edge and breathes through the pressure behind her eyes. 9 hours in this day. One moment of being almost right instead of right, and the almost is the part that costs her because she cannot yet tell if it's a gap in her knowledge or a gap in the conditions she was given to work with. Both feel like her fault. Neither would feel like her fault if she'd had a day to settle instead of a closing shift on day 1. Her phone buzzes. She looks at the screen. I'm closing the shift today. Adjust demands with me. 7 words. Tay Young's name. Team channel. She stands in that hallway for 4 full seconds and feels the weight leave her shoulders so precisely, it's almost physical. The specific release of someone removing a thing she had been carrying without realizing how hard she was gripping it. She has never met anyone who gave like that. Without ledger, without announcement, without requiring her to explain first. She stays in the hallway for 2 more minutes, alone with the fluorescent hum, before she walks back to her desk and logs off. The team channel is quiet now. The campaign has gone live. On her screen, The confirmation banner loads in 3 languages, and every adapted line of text, English, Portuguese, Brazil, Korean, sits exactly where it was placed. The work is out in the world. The version she produced is in there, corrected and cleaned, but present. She looks at it for longer than necessary. Then she closes her laptop. Zatararum. She finds out on day 7. Not from the chat. Ha-un mentions it in passing, the way people mention weather, casually, without realizing they are detonating something. She says, while they are both at the printer, that Tay Young apparently stayed until 11, closing out the campaign shift on Thursday. Dorothy processes this information over exactly 3 seconds. He stayed until 11? She asks. Ha-un glances at her. The Brazil version needed another pass. He fixed it. She takes her documents off the tray and walks back to her desk. Conversation closed. Dorothy stands at the printer for a moment. She looks at the machine finishing its last sheet. The paper comes out warm. She takes it without reading what's on it, sets it down, picks it back up, and finally puts it in her folder, because standing at the printer staring at nothing is the kind of behavior that gets noticed on an open floor. Then she goes to find him. He is at his desk with the checklist on the monitor, the pen in his pocket, headphones hanging around his neck. He looks up when she arrives, and his expression does what it always does, processes without commenting. She says, "I heard you stayed until 11 to fix the Brazilian version. I want to say thank you." He looks at her for a beat, not dismissive, not uncomfortable, just considering the words. "You don't owe me anything," he says. "Rest and come back." It's the cleanest possible answer. It is also, to Dorothy, completely disorienting. She has grown up in environments where kindness has a return address, not always obvious, not always demanded, but present, understood, part of the social economy. Her mother taught her to say thank you, yes, but also to understand that behind every favor is a relationship, and relationships have weight that needs tending. She knows how to tend. She came prepared to tend. And here is a man who closed a shift that was not his, stayed 4 hours later than his schedule required, fixed a problem that originated in a file she produced, and is now looking at her as though the matter is genuinely closed. She doesn't know what to do with that. "That doesn't work for me," she says. He raises an eyebrow. The first time she's seen him do it. "Which part?" "The part where you did something significant, and I'm supposed to just move on." He considers this. Then he says, "I've been working here 4 years. The first week is always harder than it needs to be. The system wasn't ready for you on day 1. That's not a problem you created." He picks up his pen and makes a mark on the checklist. The Brazil version was a minor tone issue, fixable. You would have caught it with another hour. I didn't have another hour. "No," he agrees. "You didn't. That's why I did." He says it the way you state the time, factual, without drama, without the particular weight people usually put under generosity to make sure you feel it. She stares at him for a moment that is 1 beat too long to be professional, and she is acutely aware of it, and she cannot stop it. "Okay," she finally says. "Okay," he says, and goes back to his checklist. She walks back to her desk and sits down and opens her work screen and stares at it for approximately 90 seconds without reading anything on it. Ha-un, from 2 rows over, is watching her with the glasses half lowered, and an expression Dorothy is beginning to learn means she is paying very close attention. The next morning, Dorothy arrives 11 minutes early. She reads back through the overnight messages. She opens the localization tool and begins cross-referencing the Brazil campaign tagging taxonomy against the North America version, looking for the structural misalignment she suspects is causing the tonal issues in translation. It takes 2 hours. She finds 3 inconsistencies. She logs them with proposed corrections in the shared comment thread. She does not tell Tay Young. She does not tell anyone. She just puts the work where the work belongs and lets it be found. At some point, she notices the checklist on his monitor. Handwritten, not digital. She has looked at it every day, and now, for the first time, she understands why. A handwritten checklist doesn't crash. When everything in the system goes down, the paper still has the steps. She files this away and thinks about what it says about a person who builds contingencies before they are needed. The Brazil campaign runs, and the numbers are not good. Not catastrophic. The content deploys cleanly. The technical side holds. But the engagement data from the first 72 hours comes back flat. Opens, low. Click through on the adapted content, low. Organic shares, essentially none. Director Park receives this in a meeting Dorothy is not in, and the meeting ends quietly, which is always the loudest possible outcome. Dorothy has been watching the dashboard since the campaign launched. She has also been watching something else, the engagement data from campaigns that did work in Brazil over the past 2 years, specifically the ones that got organic traction. She has been cross-referencing those with the current campaign's creative and copy decisions. She has been building a document. She did not ask anyone if she should do this. She did not announce it. She just built it, because the data was there and the pattern was visible and she knows what she's looking at. The document is 11 pages. She brings it to Ha-eun first, not because she trusts her fully yet, but because Ha-eun is the person most likely to tell her honestly if this is a mistake. Ha-eun reads it. She takes her glasses off. This, Dorothy has learned, means she is paying real attention. You pulled all this from the existing reports? Ha-eun asks. The data was accessible. I just organized it. Ha-eun reads the conclusion section twice. Her expression does not change. This is going to make someone feel like they missed something obvious. I know, Dorothy says. That's a problem. Or it's a solution if it's framed as a systemic gap rather than an individual failure. Ha-eun looks at her over the top of the document. Something shifts in her eyes. Not warmth exactly, but the absence of the cold. She hands the document back. Frame it as a systemic gap, she says. Dorothy sends the document to Director Park with a 1-paragraph cover note that frames it as a systemic gap. He does not respond for 2 days. On day 3, in the general channel, the team receives a message announcing a revised content approach for the Brazil market going forward, citing an analysis of engagement patterns. The analysis is not credited to Dorothy. Her name does not appear in the message. The logic in the approach is exactly hers. Then, an hour later, she receives a direct email from Director Park. 4 lines. He says the structural reasoning was sound. He says the implementation will begin next cycle. He says nothing about the extension, about her position, about what this means. But he CC'd no one. And 4 lines from Director Park, Dorothy has learned in her short time here, is the equivalent of a paragraph from anyone else. Ha-eun stops by her desk that afternoon. She does not sit. She stands with her folder, glasses on. I saw the email, she says. Dorothy looks up. He CC'd you? No. Ha-eun pauses. But I know what 4 lines from him means. She adjusts her glasses. You're no longer an exchange student in this department. She walks away before Dorothy can answer. That night, Dorothy calls her mother. She doesn't go into details. Her mother does not know the full landscape of the office, and Dorothy does not want to explain all of it tonight. She just says that today was a good day. Her mother asks if she's eating. She says yes. Her mother says she's proud of her. Dorothy says she knows. After she hangs up, she sits in her temporary housing with the city outside the window, the sole nightscape she is slowly learning to read, and thinks about what Ha-eun said. No longer an exchange student. She's not sure what she is instead, but she feels the difference between being tolerated and being registered, between taking up space and earning it. She opens her laptop and adds a new section to the contingency document she has been quietly building since the week after the closing shift. She doesn't know yet when she'll need it. She knows she'll need it. The people in this office who don't have a plan B don't get second chances. She saw it in week 1 and filed it where she files everything that matters. She works until midnight. When she finally sleeps, It is without the shallow, surface-running anxiety she's been carrying since landing in Seoul. She finds the note on a Tuesday. It's a square of paper, torn from a pocket notebook, folded once, sitting on the corner of her keyboard. She opens it during her morning readback and finds a list of 4 internal acronyms: GLCR, DMV3, FWL, CSP, with plain English explanations beside each, handwritten in blue ink. Below the list, a 5th line. These come up in QA sign-off meetings. They're not in the public documentation. No signature. But she knows the handwriting from the checklist. She looks across the floor. Tay Young is already at his desk, headphones on, the pen in his left pocket, the checklist on the monitor. He does not look over. She folds the paper and puts it in the front pouch of her bag, and she does this without thinking about it, which is how she knows it matters. The note changes something small but real in their working dynamic. She now has a reference she can use without having to ask, without creating the visible moment of the exchange student needing help, in front of the people who are watching to see if she needs help. She can look at the note privately, understand the meeting in real time, and perform the competence she actually has. It's a small infrastructure. It changes what she's able to do. She catches him at the coffee machine that afternoon. Not staged. She is genuinely getting coffee and he is genuinely refilling his cup, and they stand beside each other with 2 feet between them and the sound of the machine. The acronyms were useful, she says. He nods. There are more. I'll add to the list when I think of them. You don't have to. He gives her a look that is almost dry. I know I don't have to. She smiles, and she means it, and his expression shifts just slightly, not a smile, but something adjacent, like the muscles considering it. She notices this. She catalogs it, and tells herself she is not cataloging it. They walk back to their respective desks with their coffees. The distance between them across the floor is about 30 feet. She is aware of it in the specific way you become aware of a space when it's no longer just space. Kyungrae Soh appears beside Tay Young's desk 12 minutes later. He has both his phones and the expression he wears when he is trying not to look amused. He says something in Korean. Quiet. Tay Young says something back. Flat. Kyungrae Soh makes a sound that might be a suppressed laugh and walks away. Dorothy, 3 rows over, cannot hear any of this. But she sees it. She knows what it looks like when a friend notices something before you do. She files the observation without a category and returns to her screen. That evening, for the first time since she arrived, she stays past her scheduled hours voluntarily. Not because she needs to catch up, but because she has an idea about the next campaign's French Canada version, and she wants to follow the thread while it's clear. She is the last one on her section of the floor. Tay Young leaves at 7:15, passing her desk on his way out. He pauses. You have access to everything you need? He asks. Yes. He nods. He leaves. It is 12 words total, and she looks at the empty space where he was standing for approximately 4 seconds before turning back to her screen. Nerfurtin. She hears it secondhand, the way bad things usually travel. Ha-eun tells her, delivering the information with the clinical precision of someone who has decided that knowing is better than not knowing. Ji-won made a comment, she says, during a break room conversation that included 3 people, all of whom will have told 3 more people by morning. The comment? That Tay Young's coverage of Dorothy's shift on day 5, his quick defense of her work in the alignment meeting, and his continued availability to her were not professional habits, but personal interest. That her results were not results, they were outcomes of his protection. Dorothy puts her pen down. Ha-eun watches her. I thought you should hear it clean. I appreciate that. She picks the pen back up, then puts it down again. Who heard it? 3 people in the break room. Ji-won doesn't speak quietly when he wants to be heard. After Ha-eun leaves, Dorothy sits with this for 15 minutes. She knows what the comment is doing. It is repositioning her competence as a side effect of someone else's attention, which turns her work into evidence of favoritism rather than capability. It is the kind of attack that doesn't require a lie, just a reframe. The facts are true. The meaning applied to them is the problem. She goes to Tay Young. He is at his desk, checklist, pen, headphones off because it's past 3. She sits in the empty chair beside his desk without asking, the chair that exists for team consultations, and says, "I need to ask you something directly." He turns to look at her, gives her his full attention. "Are you helping me because you feel sorry for me? Or because of some other reason I'm not seeing?" He is quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Processing. "I help because you do the work right," he says. "If you didn't, I wouldn't cover anything." It lands with the weight of something simple and completely true. She stares at him. "That's it?" she asks. "That's it." He tilts his head slightly. "Did someone tell you otherwise?" She looks at her hands. Jiwon made a comment. He doesn't react with visible anger. He makes a short sound, not quite a sigh, and looks at the ceiling briefly. Jiwon has been trying for the team lead position for 2 years. He sees interference where there's just competence. "But it still matters," she says. "The comment will follow my work. Anything I deliver now gets read through it. Only if you let people use it as the primary lens." She looks at him. "Easy for you to say." And he accepts this. He doesn't argue it or soften it. He just nods once and says, "You're right. It's not the same from where you're standing." A pause. "So, what do you want to do about it?" She thinks about this. "Keep working. Make it harder to use." He nods again. "Then that's the answer." She gets up to go back to her desk. She stops. "For what it's worth," she says. "Knowing you helped me, because the work warranted it matters more than you think." He picks up his pen. "Good," he says quietly. She walks back to her desk. The thing growing between them has a name now. Not romance yet, not even close, but it is an understanding. A mutual acknowledgement that neither of them is performing something. She knows this is the most dangerous moment in the whole process. Later, she learns through Kyungrae, via a casual remark in the break room delivered between bites of something that smells strongly of sesame oil, that Tay Young had known about Jiwon's comment before she came to him. Not because he monitors the gossip network, but because he has been on this floor long enough that information eventually settles near him. He said nothing to her about it. He let her come to him on her own terms, in her own time, with her own question. She sits with this for the rest of the afternoon. The specific restraint of someone who knows and doesn't use knowing as a way in, that says something about who he thinks she is, about the kind of person he chooses to be. She adds a line to her private dictionary, not a translation. Just a note. Some people give you information when you need it. Some give you space to find your own way to it. The second kind is rarer. If you're already rooting for both of them, you already know what's happening here. Subscribe so you don't miss the turn that changes everything. The project is called Global Voice Initiative, a high-visibility strategic effort to reposition the company's content identity across 5 international markets. It is the kind of project that goes on a resume and gets mentioned in annual reviews. Director Park is allocating team resources this week, and the list will determine who gets associated with the company's public identity going into the next cycle. Dorothy is not on the first draft of the list. She accepts this. She focuses on her current deliverables. Then she hears she was proposed for inclusion. She doesn't know who proposed her. The internal process isn't fully transparent. What she does know, 3 days later, is the result. She wasn't included. And she knows, because Ha-eun tells her, directly, the same clinical precision delivery she uses for anything that will cause a reaction she doesn't want to watch surprise someone. "I voted against your inclusion," Ha-eun says. Dorothy stops what she is doing. "I want to explain it to you, not let you hear it wrong from somewhere else," Ha-eun continues. She sits down, folder on her lap, glasses on. The project is high exposure. It is also high risk. The French-Canada component has an unresolved brief, and the timeline is aggressive. If that component fails, the failure will attach to the names on the project. You have been here for 3 weeks. You don't have enough institutional surface area to absorb a visible failure right now. Dorothy is quiet. I didn't do it to protect you, Ha-eun adds. I did it because I calculated the risk for your position here, and this project doesn't help you yet. It might hurt you. The silence between them is not hostile. It is the silence of two people sitting with something that is true and unwelcome at once. I understand the logic, Dorothy says. I know, Ha-eun says. And I know that doesn't make it easier. After Ha-eun leaves, Dorothy sits with this for the rest of the afternoon. The blow is not the rejection itself. She has been rejected, redirected, and reframed for 3 weeks, and has built a working tolerance for it. The blow is that the person who understood her position most clearly, more clearly than anyone else in the office, looked at the same data Dorothy would have used to argue for herself and reached the same conclusion the system would have. Tay Young protected her through the exact mechanism the system uses to hold people back. The motive was different. The effect was identical. She does not feel angry at Tay Young. She feels angry at the fact that the logic holds. She goes home that night and opens her laptop and begins typing an email to her mother. I think I might need to consider coming back. She types the whole thing. The exhaustion, the G1 comment, the allocation vote, the way she still can't fully tell if she's failing or just being filtered. She types it all, and then sits back and reads it from the beginning. She reads, I'm tired of trying to be invisible enough not to bother, and visible enough to be noticed. She reads that line twice. It is the most honest sentence she has written since landing in Seoul. She doesn't send it, not because the feelings aren't real, because there's something else she hasn't tried yet. The draft sits in her outbox for 16 hours. She sleeps badly, surface level, the kind of sleep that runs beside wakefulness without ever fully committing. In the morning, she makes coffee in the small kitchen of her housing and reads the draft again on her phone. Reads it like she's reading someone else's handwriting. I'm tired of trying to be invisible enough not to bother and visible enough to be noticed. She closes the draft without sending it, opens her work document, opens her notes, opens the file she has been building on the side, not for a current deliverable, but for the one argument she hasn't made yet. She has been thinking about the extension process since week 2, when she understood, through 3 careful conversations and one overheard comment from Ha-eun about the 2 previous exchange students who didn't get theirs renewed, that extensions were not automatic and not guaranteed, and not primarily about relationship capital. They were about auditable contribution. The department needed to see that retaining her cost less than replacing her, and onboarding someone new to the cultural and linguistic context she had spent 3 weeks building. She has been building the argument for weeks. She just hasn't presented it. She also knows, and this is the part that kept her from building the document sooner, that presenting it wrong is worse than not presenting it at all. If she walks in asking to be kept, she loses. If she walks in showing what she can deliver, she is a different kind of conversation. She has been waiting for the moment when the work she'd done was substantial enough to speak, before she had to. The French Canada brief is that moment. 3 weeks in development, grounded in data, with a realistic timeline and a risk disclosure section that shows she has thought about what could go wrong. No one asked her to write it. She wrote it because the gap was there, and she could see it, and the work needed doing. She arrives 12 minutes early to the office, and spends the first hour doing her assigned work without distraction. Then she sends Director Park a meeting request with a subject line that says, Extension Proposal, D. Williams, 15 minutes. She doesn't ask Tay Young first. She doesn't ask Ha-eun. She doesn't run it past Kyungrae Soh or anyone in the team channel. She sends the request, returns to her work, and does not check her email compulsively for the next 2 hours. He accepts for the following morning. That evening, Tay Young finds her in the break room at 7, building the slide deck for the meeting. 3 pages, clean, specific, no decorative language. He doesn't ask what she's working on. He refills his water bottle. She can feel him reading the screen from the angle he's standing. You're presenting to Park, he says. Not a question. Tomorrow at 9. He is quiet for a moment. Do you want a review? She looks up. She thinks about it. And this is the thing she cannot paper over, the thing that has been sitting under every interaction for weeks. She wants to say yes, and she knows she can't. Not because of pride, but because if she walks into that meeting having had Tay Young's fingerprints on the proposal, the favoritism narrative wins. The work has to be completely hers. No, she says. He reads her face. And then he nods. And she can see in the nod that he understands exactly why she said no, and that he isn't hurt by it, and that understanding is, somehow, the most intimate thing that has happened between them. Good luck, he says, and leaves. She finishes the deck alone. It is 8:45 p.m. when she leaves the building. On the subway home, she deletes the draft email to her mother without opening it again. The meeting room has a glass wall and Soul in the background. Director Park is already seated when she arrives, 2 minutes early, with his cup of tea at the corner of the desk and the particular stillness of someone who has run 100 of these evaluations and knows, within the first 30 seconds of a person entering the room, approximately how it will go. Dorothy sits. She does not apologize for requesting the meeting. She does not soften the opening. She opens the deck on her laptop, turns the screen so they can both see it, and says, "I'm presenting the case for my extension, with a measurable delivery plan." Park says nothing. He drinks his tea and listens. She walks him through it in 12 minutes. Not reading from the slides, she knows it well enough to speak directly, making eye contact, letting him interrupt when he needs to. The proposal is built on 3 pillars: the Brazil market engagement analysis she already delivered, the French-Canada brief she has been developing independently after seeing the gap in the Global Voice Initiative materials, and a 6-week deliverable plan for the extension period with specific, measurable targets and risk flags she identified herself. She has rehearsed this. Not in front of a mirror, in the margins of her other work, in the subway, in the gaps between tasks. The rehearsal wasn't about memorizing lines. It was about knowing the argument so thoroughly she could set it down and pick it back up from any point without losing the thread. She built this proposal the way she built the contingency file, not because someone told her to, but because the alternative was arriving unprepared, and she stopped allowing herself that option somewhere around week 2. She does not mention Tay Young. She does not mention Jiwon's comment, the allocation vote, or the first week's closing shift. Those are not relevant. What is relevant is in the slides. Park asks 4 questions. 1 about the French-Canada brief's viability given timeline constraints. She answers with the contingency plan she built in anticipating exactly that objection. 1 about her access to the regional data sources she referenced. She names each one and how she obtained access. 1 about her language certification level for Portuguese. She gives the exact score and adds that she has a supplementary review contact she uses for idiom checks. The 4th question he doesn't ask aloud. He reads the last slide and is quiet for 8 seconds. The Brazil analysis led to a campaign pivot that generated a 15-point improvement in click-through in the first 2 weeks, he says. Yes, she says. That's in your proposal. Yes. He closes the deck. He drinks his tea. He looks at her the way he looks at everyone in this room. As a performance variable, yes, but one that is now registered in his system at a specific value. I'll review the extension request through the standard process, he says. It takes 10 business days. I won't make exceptions to the timeline. Understood, she says. The French-Canada brief, develop it fully, and submit it through Hyun's channel. If it's sound, it goes to the project regardless of the extension outcome. She nods. He stands, which means the meeting is over. She closes her laptop, stands, bows at the right angle. He is already looking at the next item on his desk. She walks to the door. Williams. His voice stops her at the threshold. She turns. You didn't ask anyone to be in this meeting with you, he says. No. He looks at her for 2 seconds. Good, he says, and returns to his desk. She walks out into the open floor with her heart beating in a register that is not quite confidence and not quite relief, but something more durable than both. She does not look over at Tay Young's desk. She sits at her own, opens her work screen, and starts drafting the French-Canada brief. The global campaign launches tomorrow. It is the biggest thing the department has run in 18 months. 5 markets, 7 content streams, a live component that depends on the localized assets loading cleanly across platforms with different technical infrastructures. The team has been in preparation mode for 2 weeks. Everything is staged. Every version has been reviewed, QA'd, and signed off. At 9:47 p.m. the night before launch, Dorothy is the last one on her section of the floor, running one final check on the French-Canada version because she built it, and she trusts no one's review of it more than her own. Then the integration breaks. Not one version. Half of them. The staging environment for North America, Brazil, and Korea goes down at 9:52 p.m., an infrastructure failure in the third-party platform they use for cross-market deployment, a dependency conflict that no one flagged because it had never been triggered before. In the span of 8 minutes, 3 phones ring on the floor. A status alert floods the team channel, and 2 people who had already gone home arrive back in the building still in their coats. The office enters visible panic. Dorothy does not cry. She does not freeze. She opens a folder she created on day 18, a contingency document, a backup deployment checklist she built the week after she found Tay Young's handwritten checklist on his monitor and understood what it was for. She did not ask him if she should build one. She just built it because she had been in the office long enough to understand that in this environment, the people without a plan B don't get a second chance, and she was not going to be one of them. She opens the contingency file. It has an alternative deployment path for each market. It has the tech support contacts by time zone. It has a staged rollback sequence that allows the campaign to launch partially, prioritizing the 2 markets with the hardest deadlines, while the full integration is resolved. She begins working through it, opening the right communication threads, sending the right messages to the right people. Hyun arrives back on the floor at 10:10, coat still on, and stops when she sees Dorothy at the center of it. Not panicking, coordinating. She takes off her coat without a word and sits down beside her. Jiwon comes in at 10:15 and starts talking about pulling the launch date. Dorothy listens to him finish, then says, "We have a partial deployment path that covers the 2 primary markets. The other 3 can roll in 12 hours behind. The deadline isn't uniform. It's tiered. We're not pulling the date." She says this without looking up from her screen. Jiwon opens his mouth and closes it. Director Park receives the incident notification and calls the floor at 10:22. Hyun picks up. Dorothy keeps working. At the end of the call, Hyun reports that the partial deployment path is active and the primary markets will launch on schedule. Park says to keep him updated. At 10:34, Tay Young comes through the stairwell door. He has his jacket on, which means he was already home. He looks at the floor, the organized activity, the correct channels open, the right people in contact. He looks at Dorothy at the center of it, steady, running the coordination she has not been asked to run, but is the only one prepared to run. He stops. She looks up and sees him there, and something moves through her expression. Acknowledgement, and maybe something softer than acknowledgement. And then she goes back to her screen because the work is not done. Tay Young stands in the doorway of the stairwell for a moment. He has come back to cover a shift. He finds that the shift is already covered. He sits down at a secondary desk and opens his laptop. "What do you need from me?" he asks. "The Korea version is in a hold queue," she says. "If you can clear the approval on the secondary banner, we can stage it manually." "On it," he says. They work. The floor works. At 11:48 p.m., the primary markets are live. At 12:03 a.m., the secondary markets are queued. The campaign launches effectively on schedule. When it's over, the floor settles into the quiet of people who just survived something together, the specific, post-adrenaline stillness of a team that held. Hyun puts on her coat. Jiwon closes his laptop without speaking. Kyungrae Soh sends a message to the team channel that is just a single green checkmark. Dorothy leans back in her chair and breathes out. She looks at the dashboard. green across all 5 markets. Every adapted line of text she wrote over the last 6 weeks is out in the world right now, loading on someone's phone, someone's screen, in 3 languages, in 5 time zones. The new badge catches the light on her blazer, and she passes the building's internal reader on her way out later without glancing at it. The way you don't think about a door handle you've opened 1,000 times. Tay Young walks out beside her. Not together. Beside, with 3 feet between them. Through the lobby, through the main doors, into the Seoul night that is cool and clear and lit the way cities are lit when they've been working all night and don't know they're beautiful. They stand on the sidewalk outside the building. There is nothing to say. There is everything to say. The gap between those 2 things is exactly the size of the last 11 weeks. You built a plan B, he says. I learned from someone who writes their checklist by hand. He looks at her. And this time the muscles don't consider a smile. They complete it. Full. Unguarded. The first time she has seen it, and she commits it to memory the way you commit something you suspect will be important later. The way you learn a word the moment you understand you'll need it. She does not look away. Neither does he. She wasn't saved. She was supported. And she did the rest herself. This is different from everything else. If you felt this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The extension is approved on day 48. Director Park sends the confirmation email at 8:14 a.m. 2 lines, CC'd to HR and no one else. The subject line reads, Extension approved, D. Williams. She reads it at her desk, the office not yet fully populated, the morning light coming through the windows at a low angle that turns the glass walls gold. She sits with it for 30 seconds. Then she opens the French-Canada brief, which Park approved last week and added to the Global Voice initiative, and returns to work. She calls her mother on lunch. Her mother says, I knew you would. Dorothy says, I wasn't always sure. Her mother says, That's how knowing works, baby. You don't have to be sure for it to be true. She is sitting on a bench near a small park 2 blocks from the office. Seoul is mid-morning busy around her. She thinks about the hallway at the end of the floor and the 4 seconds that changed the texture of the whole first week. The weight lifted. The 7 words. The person who gave without requiring return. She thinks about what she knows now that she didn't know then. That kindness without expectation in an environment built to extract is not just generosity. It is a position, a decision. A person choosing to be the thing the environment is not. When she gets back to the office, she goes to Tay Young's desk. He is at his checklist, pen in pocket. He looks up. It came through, she says. He nods. And the nod is nothing. A small, clean acknowledgement. But his eyes carry something else. Something that has been building in increments since a stairwell door opened, and he chose, for reasons he couldn't fully name and still hasn't named, to cover a shift for a woman he hadn't yet spoken to. He thinks about that choice sometimes. How small it was in the moment. How easily he could have walked past. He has walked past before, in other companies, before the weight of watching someone break quietly became the thing he couldn't unknow. He didn't walk past this time. He's glad he didn't. Congratulations, he says. She stands there for a moment. Something has cleared between them. Not tension, but the particular uncertainty that comes from not knowing if what you feel has a place in the shared space you both inhabit. It has a place now. They both know it. Neither of them says it directly, because they both live in an environment where things don't get said directly, and also because some things don't need to be said to be understood. Coffee? She asks. He uncaps his pen and makes the last mark on the checklist. Coffee, he says, and gets up. They walk to the break room. Not together, beside each other. 3 feet, which has been their geometry since the beginning. The distance that is professional and not professional, and exactly the right size for 2 people building something slowly, calmly, without announcements. Hyun is in the break room with her folder. She sees them. She sees the extension email still open on Dorothy's phone screen. She takes her glasses off, and this means she is paying full attention. and what she sees makes her expression do something it rarely does. Open. Just slightly. Just enough to count. You stayed standing, Ha-un says. It is the most direct thing she has said in 11 weeks. Dorothy looks at her. I had help, Dorothy says. Ha-un puts her glasses back on. No, she says. Help was available. You used it right. She picks up her documents and walks past them toward the door. She pauses at the threshold. The French-Canada brief is very good, she adds, and then she leaves. Dorothy looks at Tay Young. He is making 2 coffees, moving with the unhurried efficiency of a person who has been doing this for himself for years and doesn't change the process just because someone else is watching. He hands her the cup. She takes it. The city outside the windows is the city she came to. It looks the same as it did on day 1. It feels entirely different, because now she has a place inside it. Not assigned to her. Not given. Not covered by someone else's shift. Built. One delivery at a time. One contingency file. One adaptation. One direct email to a director. One decision to stop waiting to be evaluated and start presenting herself. On her first day, she stood in a hallway with tears that wouldn't fall, holding her phone with trembling hands, and a man who owed her nothing gave her exactly that. Nothing that created a debt. Everything that cleared the weight. She used the rest herself. The draft email to her mother has been deleted. She doesn't need to go back to read it. She knows what it said. She knows it's no longer true. The badge on her blazer has been through 11 weeks of glass rooms and status meetings, and a 10 p.m. crisis, and a campaign that launched on schedule against a broken infrastructure. It doesn't smell of new plastic anymore. It smells like work. Good work. Hers.